Good afternoon and welcome to Edu Talks Raising Washington. My name is Carol Davis and I'm the Associate Dean at the College of Education at the University of Washington. And I'm here to join you in learning about effective practices in our early learning communities. I'm here to join you in doing that. It's been a long time, but many years ago I started out as a kindergarten teacher and preschool teacher serving students with disabilities. So I feel right at home with all of you and hope to, and know I will be learning tonight just as you will. We're so thrilled to be here and especially joining you at this conference in making sure that we are promoting and giving students, young children, the opportunities to learn and thrive. Many of you have traveled across the state to be here and to participate in this conference. And I wanted to say thank you on behalf of my colleagues and the College of Education for the work that you do. It's important work. It's important work for our communities, and it's important work for our families. And again, just thank you for everything that you do on a daily basis. Raising Washington is a strategy at the College of Education in which we're hoping to bring together partners, early learning partners, K-12 partners, policymakers, and community members and family members to help us understand and promote best practices in early learning. To launch this effort tonight, we have 8 leading researchers in the area of early learning joining us, and they're here to share some of those best practices and policies and things that we need to be thinking about as it's our job to continue to provide those opportunities for our children to grow and learn. With that said, our first person, actually all of our presenters, will have 5 minutes and use one image behind them to talk about their research, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of move forward and use some of those strategies as you join us in the Early Learning Institute. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Holly Schindler to the stage. Holly is an assistant professor, and she is going to talk about dads.
Thanks, Carol. I have a mic.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I invite you to imagine a time when you've seen a dad out with his infant or toddler, perhaps walking to the park or dropping his child off at daycare. Now imagine that his child's crying to let dad know that they want to be picked up. Or maybe the child's having a meltdown because of something that they wanted that they didn't get. Or perhaps the child needs a diaper change. In these everyday scenarios, how often or how do you think observers typically react? How often do you think people see dad and believe he's got this? Unfortunately, not all that often. Fathers are rarely portrayed or perceived as capable nurturers to their young children. Instead, fathers, particularly low-income fathers and fathers of color, are told by our society, our programs, and our policies that they aren't doing enough as parents. They're often told that their primary role is providing financially, not providing care. And many have heard these messages so many times that they've started to believe it themselves. It's time to change the narrative. We know from decades of research that fathers play an important and unique role in their children's development. And it's not just about paying the bills. It's about dads building healthy, nurturing relationships with their children. When fathers engage in positive interactions with their infants and toddlers, it helps form the foundation for learning and social-emotional well-being. So now that we know dads matter, how do we support fathers so that they know it too? Over the past 3 years, we've been adapting and implementing a 6-week program aimed at doing just that. So in short, an early learning home visitor observes a father in his home each week and films dad naturally interacting with his child. In between visits, we take that film and we create a highlight reel. everyday moments of dad doing really great things with his child. The following week, we show dad his highlight reel. We focus on specific parenting skills and explain why those skills are important for his child's development. The magic is in making dad his own model. And here's what we've learned. After completing the program, fathers engage more frequently and more positively with their young children and report lower levels of parenting stress, so moving from above average levels to well below average levels of stress. We also see fewer behavior problems in their children. And we've learned that by focusing on what fathers are doing right, they gain the skills and confidence to say, I've got this. One of those dads is James. So before James enrolled in our program, he told us that he did not know how to recognize or respond to his child's cues. So we created those highlight films of James and focused on instances when he was really doing an excellent job recognizing and responding to his daughter. So for example, when his daughter finished a puzzle by putting in the last piece, James noticed her excitement and responded with encouragement by giving her a hug and saying, "Great job, you did it." After our first video breakdown, James told us that was the first time he'd actually seen video of him and his daughter together, and it was hard for him to actually believe it was him in the film. He said he was so overjoyed to see the positive interactions that he was having with his daughter and the attention that he was paying towards her, that it gave him a newfound confidence. After that, James saw what we saw, a dad who cares. He's got this. So in sum, dads play a critical role in raising Washington, and we as early learning professionals can do a lot to support that role. Focus on dad's strengths, tell dads how important their involvement is, and realize that fathers, like mothers, want to build nurturing, responsive relationships with their children. By more intentionally including fathers and the supports that we offer to parents, we can encourage more dads to realize their potential as caregivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Now I'd like to welcome to the stage Angel Fedek, who's also an assistant professor in the College of Education at the University of Washington and early childhood special ed.
Hi, everybody. So you might not be able to tell when you first see me, but I was a basketball player in high school. I know, my height gives it away, I know. But I was no Kelsey Plum or Sue Bird. I was pretty good, though. In fact, I still play basketball right now. I had two coaches in high school or growing up. My first coach was my father, who was a very good basketball player in his young days. Boy, he was really critical with my basketball skills. I remember just being really, really frustrated every single time he would give me pointers about what I should do on the court, because nothing I do was good enough for him. Needless to say, that coaching relationship didn't really quite work out, and I fired him as my basketball coach when I was 12. My second basketball coach was my high school coach. He was really good at pointing out things that I should work on, very specific things that's going to help me improve my game. But what I remember most importantly was that he was very good at highlighting what I did really well on the court. And I loved playing basketball. I love my high school days. I enjoy going to school every day, look forward to practices, look forward to games. I've been very fortunate in my life that I've had great coaches who can support me throughout my life. So for example, I have my sister-in-law who I call on for life advices. I have mentors who I can call on to help me problem solve some of the professional issues that I encounter, once in a while. And then of course I have my family who I can rely on kind of these daily advices. They're all very good at listening and really thinking about key things I can do to solve the problems that's at hand. But what's very critical was that they were all very engaging, they're all very encouraging, and they celebrated my successes with me. So when I work with teachers, I make sure I use those same strategies so that to support them in using evidence-based practices in the classrooms when they work with kids. Well, I remember when I had my first child, I wondered, who can come in to coach me to be a parent. Man, being a first-time parent was very, very challenging. And I just remember, especially those times where my daughter will skip a nap and then have massive meltdowns at dinner time. Or at pickup time at childcare, she will throw a big fit because she wasn't ready to go home. How many of you have seen the show Super Nanny? Yeah, remember Jill Frost with her very, very strong British accent going to homes, helping desperate parents, trying to figure out what's going on with those challenging behaviors, and then try to help them problem solve and think about different things they can do, right? So I remember watching that show and going, I really want her to come into my home and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Why is my kid crying? Why is my kid on the floor screaming? Right? Come in and look under the hood of the car and tell me exactly what I'm doing wrong and help me hone my parenting skills. So, who do parents go to when they need those kinds of support? Who are the ones who can provide them the evidence-based practice and the strategies that we know is effective for kids? Who are the ones who supports parents in implementing those? Who are the ones who can go into the classroom or to the homes and be able to observe what's going on, be able to kind of understand and listen and understand what's the routine at home, what are the values and the parenting philosophy, and provide some tips and strategies that parents can use at home to address these challenging behaviors and support the children's overall development. But most importantly, who are the ones who can tell parents that they're doing a great job when they're using these strategies and it's working? So this whole idea of family-centered practice is really important if we want to make sure that children's development is supported throughout the day. So I'm pretty new to the state of Washington, but I know in early childhood education and special education, this idea of family-centered practice is really key to what we do, and it should be our priority. And I know the state of Washington is working really hard to make sure this is at the forefront of what we do as well. We as early child educators need to be the ones who are able to provide parents with these evidence-based practices that they can use at home to support the kids. Because if a child has learned an effective strategy to ask for a snack at school, they're going to be asking for a snack at home too. The last I checked, they do not take a break from asking for snacks at night and at weekends, right? They ask for these things throughout the day. Parents need to be able to know how to support them. But most importantly, we need to be there to help celebrate the successes. Be able to tell them that they're doing a great job when they're using these strategies and things are working at home, right? As adults, we all know that praise and reinforcement are great to make sure that positive behaviors continue to occur. And so I would encourage you that the next time you see a parent using great strategy and working really hard, make sure you tell them that they're being a great parent and they're doing a great job.
Thank you, Angel. Now, coming to the stage is Naya Feryan Ramirez, and she is a research scientist in the iSchool.
How many of you consider yourselves to be bilingual? I see some hands. Statistics show that about 2/3 of the world's population can understand or speak 2 or more languages. Of course, in today's global world, being bilingual has many advantages. It allows us to talk to more people, it creates job opportunities, it even protects us against Alzheimer's disease. Research also shows that those who regularly use 2 or more languages have increased executive functioning, so skills related to shifting our attention, going back and forth between doing 2 different tasks, or thinking flexibly. And I think we can all agree that these skills are important to be successful in the 21st century. The idea that I would like to discuss today is, what if we could prepare all Washington children to enter kindergarten knowing not 1, but 2 languages? I'm a researcher at the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, and I study how children learn language. One important finding from the last years is that children are born learning. Language learning doesn't start at the age of 1 or 2 years. It actually begins before birth. Babies are born with an incredible ability to hear the differences between sounds of all different languages of the world. This is something that you and I can no longer do. So they're born citizens of the world, but over time, their brains specialize to process the language that they're hearing, their native or home language. However, research shows that the baby brain can just as easily specialize to process two languages. In one of my recent studies, we showed that at 11 months of age, the brains of babies from monolingual families were sensitive to English and not to Spanish, a language which to these babies was unfamiliar. But the brains of 11-month-old bilingual babies, babies from Spanish-English families, were equally sensitive to both languages, Spanish and English. So this means that at 11 months of age, or before babies even begin to talk, their brains are specialized to whatever language or languages are present in the environment. It also shows that the baby brain is just as capable of learning two languages as it is of learning a single one. So, given these findings, one question you may be asking yourselves is, can we provide all children with an opportunity to experience a second language during this critical time window in development when their brains are primed for learning? We think that we can. We combined everything that we know, that we have learned over the last few decades of language research, and created a teaching method and curriculum for very young children, 0 to 3, to be used by early education centers who want to teach second languages. The method is based on 6 research principles and implemented entirely through play-based interactions. It emphasizes high quality and quantity of teacher language, playful social interactions, and active child engagement. After developing this method, we trained 16 University of Washington undergrads, all native speakers of English, and sent them to Madrid, Spain, to be the first tutors of our method for Spanish babies 0 to 3 years of age. They taught these babies to speak English according to our method, and as you can see in this image, they engaged these babies and children in playful interactions and encouraged them to be active participants from the first day on. We gave participating children 1 hour of foreign language per day over a period of 18 weeks. And what we found was that these children showed extremely rapid growth in English. We observed incredible gains in terms of their language production, but also understanding. Compared to a group of children who stayed in Madrid's standard program of bilingual instruction, the children who received this intervention showed 5 times higher gains in producing English words and sentences. So of course, we're very excited about these findings because what they show is that if we take the right science-based approach, we can give young children an opportunity to start learning a second language with 1 hour of play per day in the context of early education centers. We are right now in the process of manualizing this method, as well as adapting it for preschool centers serving children 4 to 5 years of age. But perhaps the most exciting part about this is that the method is scalable and can be used to build bilingual brains worldwide. The teaching principles are universal and can be applied to teach children to speak any foreign language anywhere in the world, including in Washington State. So our goal is to offer all Washington State children an opportunity to harness their natural capacity of their brain to learn not 1, but 2 languages. Thank you.
Thank you, Naya. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Andy Schaus. He is the Chief Program Officer at Washington STEM, and he's going to talk to us about math, playful math, in fact.
Thank you. Hi. Okay, you have to make people react before you stop feeling nervous to do this thing, so chuckle. Thank you very much. So I think every child, every young child, and every older child, and every child that becomes an adult should learn math playfully. They should see math as a fundamental part of the world we live in, and they should see it as a thing that helps them solve problems. It has intrinsic value because it's beautiful and it's fun and it opens doors, and it has exchange value because it allows you to make progress in your academic career and in your life beyond school. It's not happening, but it's time for a revolution because it needs to happen to get these kids ready to go out and thrive. And the people who can do it are you, because you're early childhood educators, and the time to do it is now. And I say it's you who can do it, who can lead this charge, because in my lifetime, the only thing that I can look at as transformative in education is the development of early literacy. And you people are at the forefront of that, and you have accomplished that. You've led us in that, and we're thankful. Nowadays, every child, virtually every child, learns to read. And even those peers of mine who grew up in a very humble town and who themselves were not surrounded with books, I see them now in generations forward. They're reading to their kids. They're listening to their kids babble. They're understanding that kids are making sense of the world through that. And that's because we've said, hey, no longer are we going to let people be illiterate. We're going to teach them to read, and we're going to value their language and give them attentive adults surrounding them and supporting that process. It's time to do that in early math, and the people who can help us with that are you. Now, what does that mean? Math is not the same as literacy. We use it in different ways in different places. So what does it look like? I want to talk to you about my friend Sylvie and give you a little context for how I see this. Sylvie is 3.5 years old, not 3, and she's an adorable little cherub of a human. She lives in South Seattle in Renton area, if you're familiar with that area, and I've gotten to know her over the last few months. She lives with her mom and her grandma, who she calls abuelita, because her grandma is a immigrant from the Dominican Republic and is herself a language learner. And they have a lovely life. I mean, they're doing everything right and with very few resources. It's a loving home. Mom and grandma get on well. They work hard. And on a regular day, this is what it looks like. Sylvie wakes up about 7 o'clock, and mom is rushing around to get out the door. She's got a 9-to-5 job and a big commute to get there, so she wakes her up just in time to give her a kiss and say goodbye. Abuelita gets her ready. They brush the teeth, brush hair, wash your face, have breakfast, eat together, just as it happens in my house, rushed and hurried and collaborative and all that beautiful stuff. And then later on, they have a little quiet time. They read books, they hang out, play games. They might sneak in a TV show, though mom doesn't really like to know that happened. Then they have a quick lunch, and Abuelita has to go off to her part-time job. She works at a restaurant not far from their home. She walks with Sylvie to a neighbor's home a couple blocks away. Sylvie plays in this home child care setting with the other kids in the neighborhood, and they have a snack. And then a couple hours later, mom picks up the grandma. They pick up Sylvie on the way home. They come home. They make a quick meal. Usually, almost always, it's mac and cheese because it's quick and easy, and that's what Sylvie demands. And then they do their bedtime routine, okay? As you can see, as I've characterized that day, it's highly functional, right? Highly collaborative. And clearly, these people are doing it right. There's just love and functionality. You can just feel it around these folks. But you didn't see me highlight anything about mathematics. It's not a very prevalent factor in their lives. And it's not because they don't want to. It's because they don't see it as a thing they do. Mom and grandma themselves never had really great experiences in school, so they think, I don't really want to push on that. And by the way, that's the school's job. And Sylvie's just doing what she does. She's this beautiful little girl going about playing and doing her thing. But let's imagine that we go back and we can run through that day again, and that these women and this little girl are equipped with tools and with a message that, hey, math is important, math is fun, math is critical to all those things you do every day. Think about those day-to-day processes of brushing teeth or brushing hair. You can count how many strokes per side per tooth. You can set a timer and see if you've done 2 minutes of brushing on each side, as my dad did to me when I was a little boy. Cooking, mac and cheese. You can figure out how long does it take for that water to boil. We could set a timer. And someone's got to measure that 1/4 cup of skim milk to mix it in to make the recipe. Those are all very easy, convenient, everyday things that if the family had that view that, hey, you know what, we ought to be teachers of math, we ought to be learners with Sylvie, they would do it, and they could do it. And if you think about just a little bit of resource you could put into this household that you could do to support her, Sylvie's math learning, think about it. With a little language assistance around math so that grandma can talk about mathematics with Sylvie in Sylvie's first language, she could go a long ways. With some guidance about the kinds of games you put in the living room, that you put in the child care center, we could do a lot of things. Finally, they read a lot of books, and they read books with an eye towards the story. But what if you just took all those same books, all those wonderful childhood stories, and you read them with an eye towards numeracy? You don't even have to pick a math book. Pick a book that allows you to do some counting and some analysis and some sorting and organizing. These are all basic fundamental things that, with a little bit of support and a little bit of guidance, I think we can all learn to do with children. So sadly, that's not what's happening for Sylvie or for most of her peers. In fact, we now have scientific evidence. You remember the studies back in the day we used to talk about literacy? In wealthy homes, there was a large vocabulary and lots of language and talking to kids, and in poorer homes, there was less of that. Well, now we have the same finding, a scientific observation in math talk. Wealthy folks are talking about math and numbers with their kids, and folks with fewer resources are not. But they can, and they need to, and we need to help them do that. So I want to enlist your help today. I want to tell you first what we're doing at Washington STEM to address this, and then I want to give you a couple specific things that I hope you'll leave here thinking, hey, I can do something about this. So at Washington STEM, we've made a series of grants throughout the state in organizations that are working on this problem. There are 3 themes in the work. One is providing culturally sensitive guidance. That means language support, that means putting resources into homes that don't have a super high level of literacy, but helping them use these tools to engage with their children. It means building resources and experiences that are fundamentally about family engagement, bringing families into events and creating structures for them to participate together. And third, we're working on scaling this stuff. So specifically here in Eastern Washington, the way that looks is we work with Ready Kindergarten, which is an organization in Tri-Cities, and they're scaling out culturally relevant early math materials in Chelan and Douglas counties, working in families that are bilingual and in rural communities. We're also working with the Regional Education Lab, a federal entity, to put on a series of Train the Trainers workshops on math attitudes. That'll be happening in this community in Spokane through our Spokane STEM network, and in the Yakima Valley through the Yakima Valley Network, and also in the Wenatchee Valley through the Wenatchee Valley Network. So those 3 activities will be coming in the next quarter, and I hope you'll find out how to get involved and become a leader in helping people have a positive attitude and think about how to build that positive attitude among our youngest learners. And finally, we've invested in the state level activity through the education service districts, the 9 big entities throughout the state, to support the early learning fellows. Maybe some of you are early learning fellows. There will be math components for that work, and we are very focused and very excited about that work and hope you'll get on board with it. So that's what we're doing at Washington STEM, and I guess the thing I'll ask that you do is that you go out and you talk to your peers and you talk to your friends. And when you go back to your Thanksgiving table, you give the message that children need to talk about and engage in mathematics. And there are easy ways to get the ball rolling. And when that loquacious aunt or that strident nephew or whoever it is at your Thanksgiving table next month starts piping off about, hey, math isn't that great, or I had this lousy math teacher, just give them a gentle bump in the ribs and tell them the kids are paying attention and they need to hear positive messages about this so that kids can learn these positive attitudes and skills and make math go to work for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Now let's welcome Ariane Gavro, who is a faculty member also in early childhood special ed. She's going to talk about snack time.
Hello. So when was the last time that you had an awkward conversation or one of those really lengthy, uncomfortable pauses during a meal? Have you ever had that experience, sitting at the table across from someone and not really having much to say? Maybe this was dinner with your in-laws or a holiday meal. Maybe it was a bad date. We've all had this experience, right? Meals are inherently a social time, and when conversation lacks, it can be awkward. So let's shift our thinking to preschoolers, who are certainly awkward in their own adorable way. As a teacher running a program for young children with autism, I noticed that meal times were especially hard. The kids in my class struggled with following multiple step directions, with trying new foods, and they were still learning the adaptive skills to eat and to drink independently. And because all these children had autism, social communication was especially difficult. We know that kids with autism struggle to initiate and to maintain conversations with others. But it's important to note that a lot of preschoolers without autism also struggle with these things too, right? Nonetheless, some children in my class were nonverbal and used pictures to communicate. Some children were dual language learners. Other children preferred to really only speak with teachers and then to talk about very narrow subjects, things like the Great Barrier Reef or the Washington State Ferry System. Meals are an important and often social time, but we know that young children with disabilities may struggle to fully participate in them. And in Washington, we strive to create inclusive early learning environments, but we know that our kids who have disabilities and our children who are multilingual may not be able to fully participate in all of these routines. And rather, we know that systematically placing children with and without disabilities into the same classroom does not lead to reciprocal relationships. And rather, teachers must provide instruction and systematic opportunities for children to engage in positive and social interactions with one another. So we developed a visual conversation board that we called a snack talk. And the idea behind a snack talk is that anyone at the table, regardless of their language or their ability, can use this to have a conversation. So you don't need to be able to talk to use a snack talk. Now, we started by brainstorming things that we thought the kids in our class would be interested in discussing. Things like their favorite superhero, their favorite thing to do on the playground, their favorite toys to play with in the classroom, or their favorite books to read. And Snack Talk visuals always have a question at the top, like, who is your favorite character from Moana? Or what do you like to do at recess? Followed by 9 to 12 related images. And during meal times, kids can point to an interesting image or to a part of the visual rather than verbally respond. Snack Talks give kids something to talk about and a way to have a conversation without requiring spoken language. And when we've studied the use of Snack Talks in preschool settings serving kids with and without disabilities, our data demonstrated that when these were available, kids talked more to one another and less to their teachers. We also noticed that they engaged in fewer instances of challenging behavior, and they stayed at the snack table longer. When we've presented these findings at conferences and in parent groups over the years, we've had parents modify this idea and create placemats for their children to use at home. We've also had teachers cut out images from school supply catalogs and grocery store circulars when printing and lamination weren't available. One especially resourceful teacher decided to have her kids create their own snack talks as part of an art activity. So Snack Talks are a class-wide intervention that benefit a range of diverse learners, including children who are multilingual, children who might engage in high rates of challenging behavior, and kids who use augmentative communication systems. They're made from low-cost, easy-to-find materials and can be implemented within ongoing routines in preschool classrooms. Now, as adults, we know that awkward conversations and lengthy pauses within our conversations are inevitable. We will always struggle with these things. But Snack Talks ensure that meal times can go from a routine requirement to a lively and engaging activity where everyone can participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariane. Now joining us is Dr. Sujin Oh. She will be talking about lifting up children of immigrants.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I want you to take a moment and imagine what you'd like the future of our state to be 10, 20, 50 years from today. What comes to mind? What are your hopes and dreams for what Washington could be? Now, where would you raise and where would you invest to make sure that we're raising Washington to be able to get there? What if I tell you that children of immigrants are the fastest growing group of children in Washington as well as across the nation? And most of these children grow up in homes speaking a language other than English. And in fact, did you know that 1 in 3 children in our state is a dual language learner? Dual language learners, or DLLs, are a linguistically and culturally diverse group of children who will grow up to have a role in profoundly shaping the civic, political, socioeconomic, and cultural landscape of our future Washington. So then, how do we best support children of immigrants and their families? Research consistently shows that young DLLs stand to gain much more from attending high-quality preschool programs than their English-speaking monolingual peers. Recent studies have also suggested that when given the opportunities to enroll in a high-quality preschool program, young children of immigrants are gaining greater benefits in language and cognitive skills, and these learning gains actually persist over longer periods of time, all the way into their elementary grades. We know that high-quality early childhood education matters for all children in Washington state, but the impact is actually larger for children of immigrants. Unfortunately, young DLLs in Washington are enrolling in pre-K programs at much lower rates than their non-DLL peers, and this contributes to lags in their kindergarten readiness. So how are we to lift up children of immigrants that are being left behind? One way to expand early learning opportunities for young DLL is to support programs such as Head Start that places families and communities at the center. In one of my studies, I have found that Head Start not only boosted young children's vocabulary, reading, and math skills, but it actually improved how often parents are engaging their preschool children in learning activities at home. And this impact on parenting was larger among Spanish-speaking immigrant parents. These findings are hopeful, given the odds that are stacked against many of our children of immigrants today. To ensure that children of immigrants are standing on an equal footing with the rest of our children in Washington, we must understand the realities of their family context. Children of immigrants are more likely to experience deep disadvantage if their parent is undocumented or have recently arrived to the States or have lower levels of education or have jobs that pays them disproportionately lower wages, experience racial discrimination, language barriers, and poverty. How can we ensure that these children do not live in constant fear that perhaps today their parents might be taken away while dropping them off at school or taking them to an emergency room? How can we ensure equitable access to high-quality programs and services when we know that immigrant parents are less likely to take up public benefits such as child care subsidies or child health care services? In current political climate, how we choose to lift up immigrant families and their children will have dramatic consequences for our state. This is the work that stands before us. 3 to 4 years from now, when my newborn son Joshua will be ready to enter preschool, my hope is that he will meet teachers and friends who will welcome and support him to embrace his identity as a young DLL. My hope is that he will understand and know that once he finally learns how to talk, that he will not insist in speaking back to us in English only because he is ashamed of knowing another language. My hope is that he will never have to feel like he has to hide away or subtract parts of himself before entering a classroom just so that he can feel like he belongs there. My hope is that he will get to know his grandparents in their native tongue as I got to know mine. And this is the future Washington that I hope and dream for. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujin. I'd now like to introduce one of our colleagues from the Department of Psychology, Dr. Liliana Lingua.
Thank you. I'm passionate about promoting well-being in children and families, and my research focuses on understanding well-being and resilience in children when their families are experiencing significant stress and adversity. And today I want to talk about the critical role that parents play in raising resilient children when their families are living in a context of low income and poverty. I recently was contacted by a mom who was looking for some support. She was telling us that she's struggling financially. She struggles with substance use problems off and on, and she associates those with the abuse and adversity she experienced as a child. And she wasn't sure what her living situation was going to be, so it was going to be hard to contact her. But she wasn't looking for support with any of that. She was looking for support with her parenting, because she said she knew that it was her job to make sure her child didn't experience the adversity that she experienced as a child. She knew that she plays a critical role in supporting her child's well-being. Poverty is a significant public health concern. 1 in 5 children in the United States is living at or near poverty. And those kids are at increased risk for a number of assaults to their well-being. They're more likely to have physical health problems, more likely to have academic, social, and emotional problems, and more likely to have mental health problems, among other things. So we should ask ourselves, why is poverty having such a widespread impact on so many aspects of a child's well-being? Children and families living in low income and poverty experience, or are more likely to experience, extraordinary amounts of strain and stress and adversity. Families may be struggling with providing basic needs for their family, their housing and nutrition. They may be struggling with unpredictable work hours or unacceptable work hours, with finding childcare, and with accessing health and mental health and substance use care. In fact, many adults living in poverty themselves experienced significant adversity as children and are struggling with mental health and substance use issues. So these kinds of stressors and strains and the experiences of adversity in a low-income household has a direct effect on children's well-being. Growing up in a context of chronic and pervasive stress undermines the very foundations of a child's well-being by disrupting the neurobiological systems that underlie their self-regulation. Our research shows that children growing up in low income or poverty are more likely to have a disrupted cortisol system, their neuroendocrine or hormone stress response system. They're also more likely to have lower executive function, and that's our cognitive control system that controls our attention, our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And they're more likely to have disrupted physiologically based emotion regulation systems. But the stress is not the only thing that impacts those systems. Parenting plays a critical and central role in shaping the development of those neurobiological systems underlying self-regulation. When a parent maintains effective parenting, even in the face of adversity, and we always marvel at the number of parents who maintain effective parenting in the face of adversity, their children are more likely to be resilient. In our research, we found that when parents were able to maintain a warm, accepting, nurturing relationship with their child, their children had more regulated neuroendocrine stress response systems. And that supports their executive function and emotion regulation development. And when parents were able to provide this unique balance that many educators know about, of balancing giving children independence and autonomy in solving their problems while also providing just the right amount of support and guidance, and when parents were able to provide an environment that was consistent and predictable, those children had better executive functioning. And that supports their academic, social, and emotional well-being. But we also know from our research that in a context of low income or poverty and the strain that goes along with that, parent well-being can be taxed and their parenting can be compromised. Just think of yourselves for a minute. Think about when you've had a rough day. You had a conflict with someone, something went wrong at work, you sat in traffic twice as long as you normally do, or your car broke down, and you get home, and you're interacting with your family or your friends, and it's not that easy to be pleasant or patient or responsive. Now add to that the concern and the strain that you might not be able to make your rent payment and your family might be homeless in a couple weeks. or that you might lose your job because your car broke down and you can't get there. Or you might lose your job because they changed your work hours and you can't figure out the childcare that you need. Those kinds of stressors and many more happen more often in a context of low income and poverty. They tax and take a toll on a parent's well-being and their parenting, and our children pay the price. If we want to disrupt this cascade of adversity associated with low income and poverty, we need to understand that supporting parent well-being and quality of parenting, the effective parenting that parents have, is essential for parents to do their role, their job of raising children with positive academic, social, and emotional well-being with resilience. If we want to raise resilient children, we need to make top priority family-friendly policies that ensure stable housing and nutrition, that ensure reasonable, predictable work hours, family leave, that give parents access to high-quality, affordable childcare and access to health and mental health and substance use care, so that we can support parents and effective parenting and their role in raising resilient children. Think of that mom I mentioned earlier. What if she didn't have to worry about where her and her child were going to live? What if she could get the mental health and substance use treatment she needs to address her own history of abuse and adversity? And what if we could share with her what we know about effective parenting that promotes child well-being and resilience? What if we could support her in her goal to raise a resilient child? Imagine that. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker for this evening is Dr. Christy Cowers. Please welcome to the stage.
Thanks. So I recently hiked the West Coast Trail. It's a 50-mile trail along the southern coast of Vancouver Island. It's noted to be one of the most challenging hikes in Northern America. Among some of the challenges, there are 70 ladders to be climbed and descended. Now, I'm not talking step ladders. Some of these ladders are 30 feet tall. Now, 50 miles and 70 ladders gave me a lot of time to meditate on the metaphor of ladders. So herein begins my musings on school readiness. So school readiness is a hot topic in Washington. Whether you're a family child care provider, you work in a child care center, an elementary school, Head Start, ECAP, the state capitol, or in the ivory towers of UW, school readiness is a prevalent topic. But the problem is, when we focus on school readiness as being mostly about getting children ready for school, without also focusing on ensuring that schools are ready to support young children, it's like climbing a broken ladder. What we're doing is we're saying, all right, kids, you're ready for kindergarten, go. And then we wait 4 years and we test them in 3rd grade and see how that school readiness thing worked out. Or it's like putting a child at the bottom of a ladder and saying, these first few rungs, they're sturdy and strong. You get a little farther up, there's some missing rungs. Some might be broken, a little shaky, but go for it. You can do it, just get to the top. Now, I'm not saying that schools, elementary schools, are doing bad things for little children. I don't know an elementary school principal or a primary grade teacher who wakes up every morning and says, how can I do bad things to children today? In fact, most of them are doing really good things. Here's what we need more of. We need more of the early learning world working together with elementary schools to focus on readiness, children's readiness and schools' readiness. Here in Washington State, we call this P3, or preschool through 3rd grade, birth through 3rd grade alignment. And this is where, again, early learning and elementary schools work together to create alignment and coherence between their systems. Now, this isn't really easy. Really simplistically, early learning's North Star is play and child-centered learning, whereas K-12's North Star is getting every child to meet standard. So we have to find ways to navigate these differences. The good news is there are a lot of fantastic alignment efforts happening in the state of Washington. Alignment is about transition, and in fact, WaKids is one of the nation's best transition systems, focusing on that transition between pre-K and kindergarten. But we also need transitions between kindergarten and first grade and second grade, and second grade and third grade. We need teachers, community-based early learning teachers, working in teams with elementary school teachers to talk about instructional strategies, to talk about developmentally appropriate practice, to talk about how children are learning and developing. We need elementary school principals who get child development, who can walk into a first grade classroom and see children working at centers and know that that is good teaching practice. So what's happening in the state of Washington around these issues? At the University of Washington, we offer the P3 Executive Leadership Certificate Program. It's a program that co-enrolls elementary principals with early learning directors or program administrators together in a 10-month course of study to study child development, equity, and the programs and practices and processes that support young children along their full journey from preschool through third grade. P3 is also happening in places like Highline Public Schools, south of Seattle. The school district has created a comprehensive professional development plan that starts at the pre-K year and includes school-based and community-based teachers, and then it extends up all the way through fifth grade. This shared PD system focuses on developmentally appropriate, rigorous instruction and equips all of the teachers with shared language, shared strategies, and a common approach to thinking about student success. P3 is also happening in places like Pasco, where an elementary school principal realized that his ECAP and developmental preschool teachers had no contact with K3 teachers, especially around math. And so he, in partnership with ESD 123, formed Math Connections, where teachers, again community-based, and his primary school teachers joined together and aligned standards, developed shared materials, and shared instructional strategies around math. P3 is also happening in places like Yakima, where ESD 105, in partnership with child care center directors, school board members, and elementary school principals, wrote a guide around transition, not just pre-K to K, but defining what strong transitions look like every year along the continuum, pre-K to K, K to first, first to second, second to third, and so on. There are numerous other examples like this across the state, and these examples are what's raising Washington to be a national leader in thinking about school readiness, both children's readiness and the readiness of schools to support young learners. Examples like this all across our state are what's raising Washington to be a national leader in building sturdy, strong ladders of learning for children that begin at birth and extend through elementary school. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. We have just a couple of closing remarks. First, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and listening. I would also like to invite you to a reception just off to the side where all of our speakers will be there, ready to answer questions and engage you and learn from you as well. I'd also like to thank Cultivate Learning, who invited us as a part of this Early Achievers Institute and their support in allowing Edu Talks to happen. And then finally, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, Thrive Washington and Alan Cohen, who's the president and CEO, and I'd like to invite him up to the stage right now to close this out. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. So I don't actually really prepare comments like everyone else, but I do want to take the opportunity to talk to you. And it's actually pretty dangerous to put Christy and I back to back. I work for an organization called Thrive Washington. Our mission is that we want to see all kids in Washington State reading on grade level by the end of third grade. All kids. I started to think about this and what I wanted to say, and I started thinking a couple minutes ago, and I don't want you to leave this event, and I don't want you to leave the Early Achievers Conference without knowing a few numbers. Because you just heard from some great researchers, and people talk about how Washington State's a leader in early learning, and Washington State is absolutely a leader in early learning research. We are not a leader in early learning results. We are not a leader in early learning results. So the first number I want to make sure that everybody hears here is the number 41. So say that back to me, 41. Okay, if you say it, you're going to remember it. The reason I want you to say 41 is because we are 41st in the country in high school graduation in Washington State. 41st in the country. By the way, the ECAP program's been around for 30 years. We're 41st in the country in high school graduation. Why is third grade reading so important? Because we know that third grade reading is a predictor of high school graduation. We know that 1 out of every 6 kids that are not reading on grade level by the end of third grade are not going to graduate high school. That's the national research. That's all kids. And that ratio goes up when you start just looking at low-income kids. I've run the numbers. If we could get all kids in Washington State reading at grade level by the end of third grade, we would immediately cut our high school dropout rate in half. Immediately. So here's the second number I want you to remember, 36. Only 36% of low-income kids in Washington State are reading at grade level at the end of third grade. 1 out of every 3 kids that are low-income read at the end of third grade. So if I lined up 3 kids in a low-income neighborhood, and Spokane has some low-income neighborhoods. Spokane has the highest poverty census tract in the state of Washington. If I go and do that, I can guarantee you there are 2 kids that aren't reading at the end of third grade. One of the things, I'm pretty new to Washington. I've done a lot of work in early learning around the country. I've done early learning work in the South and the Northeast and other parts. And Washington confounds me. It really does. Because I got here and I was so excited. I heard all of this research, and then I asked people, what really makes Washington special? And one of the things somebody told me early on is because in Washington, we look at the education system and we look at early learning through an equity lens. I want to tell you something. There is a school in this county where 8 out of every 10 kids are not reading at grade level at the end of third grade. And it was the same last year, and it was the same before. And we haven't done anything about it. We haven't fixed it. We haven't directed. We haven't had a riot yet. That is not an equity lens. That is not equity. So I get really frustrated. I get really, really frustrated. So then 32. Say that out back. 32. We are 32nd in the country in pre-K access for 4-year-olds. 32nd. So don't tell me that Washington State is a leader. What we've got is we've got great researchers that are doing unbelievable work. But what we need now is to rise up around a common agenda. So there are some things that despite the unbelievable diversity that we should celebrate in this state, despite really how every community has unique needs and unique barriers that we should empower those communities to do work, we have not, as systems leaders, put communities in a position to be successful. And there is a common agenda of things that we can do as a system that are necessary as a system in order to put communities in a position to be successful, so communities can put families in a position to be successful and teachers in a position to be successful, so that those families and teachers can put kids in a position to be successful. And I'm going to go through it. 1, in the 0 to 3 years, kids that are eligible and families that are eligible for home visiting services that need extra intervention, we should have home visiting services available for them. 2, In the 0 to 3 years for low-income kids, we should have high-quality childcare available. 3, in the 3 and 4-year-old kids, we should have high-quality pre-K available. By the way, guarantee it. I haven't even looked at the data. Can guarantee it. If I go to that school where 8 out of 10 kids are not reading at grade level, third grade, and I look at that attendance zone, guarantee there are not enough high-quality pre-K slots for even 50% of the kids that qualify as low income. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. I shouldn't be able to do that. I don't need to know this very, very deep research when we're not even putting pre-K in front of the kids. Who here doesn't believe that pre-K is important and has a tie to reading later on? So we know this, so we should actually act on what we know. If we're unwilling to act on what we know, this becomes an intellectual exercise. We should be absolutely lighting the phone dials up in Olympia right now. Last, just like Christy was talking about, every elementary school in every school district in every ESD should have to write down a P3 alignment plan and enact it. If we do those things, think about how much change we could impact, and we know that would happen. So last, I'm going to leave you with this. What I'm not saying is that anyone has bad intentions. What I do love about this state is that I think you would be hard-pressed to find a state that community by community doesn't have a recognition for how important the early years are for a child. And I think that the people we hear from, the leaders that I interact with, the folks that are working within the system, and particularly systems leaders, they have unbelievably good intentions. And what I want you to know is that the road to poverty is paved with good intentions. We need action. And so I thank you for being here. I thank you for getting involved and acting and getting on the ground in the work of early learning. I thank you for caring about early achievers and caring about quality. And I would implore you not to take this information, find 10 people, and make sure they know the numbers. 41, we're 41st in the country in high school graduation. 36, that only 36% of our kids that are low income in this state are reading at grade level by the end of third grade. And 32, that even though our kids aren't reading by third grade, we are 32nd in the country in pre-K access. That's unacceptable, and we can change it. We can change it tomorrow. Thank you.